Hi. So let me quickly go through some slides because we need to make up some time, and I have a lot of material to show that I'll try to edit as I go. So what I'm going to present is a work that is completely in progress on the relationship between metrics and new forms of misconduct. I have, together with Alexandra Lipman, we have an edited volume on gaming metrics that is coming out this fall in Jeff Bowker Infrastructure series at MIT. But I'm doing on my own a project on specific forms of fraud and misconduct that are emerging as a result of metrics. So, in addition to all the things that we all know about metrics when they are used as a tool of evaluation, I want also to show you what kind of nice, interesting ecologies of fraud they are enabling. So it all starts from Goodhart law. Whenever you pick a feature of the economy as an indicator, it will cease to function as a proper indicator because immediately the gaming will start. And it's interesting that Alex Cesar has found an analogous formulation of Goodhart law by Merton in the private conversation with correspondence with Garfield. So for those I was told that Garfield was just a crazy man. I never spent much attention to his work. Actually, Garfield's early work is absolutely fascinating. And what he was trying to do early on with citations was really to build a map, if you want, like an invisible color, or sometimes he was clearly referring to an attempt to come up with an empirical map of a paradigm by using citations as the best evidence that somebody had read and had been influenced by a text. So the early point for Garfield was to develop a map. So citations would be links in a map. Citations were not supposed to be counted. They were visual evidence, if you want. And then there is the switch instead, forget about the map, let's count citations. And, in the correspondence, it looks like, maybe it was a conceptual shift, but also he realizes that there is a market for citation indexes, which is what he did. Okay, but anyway, but what's interesting is that Merton actually got it. And he referred to goal displacement. So as soon as you move from citations as qualitative evidence of a map to citations as an evaluative evidence, the gaming will start. And that's what happened. So this is the current federal definition of misconduct in the US. It is somewhat representative, but does not capture other countries. Like, for instance, COPE has a different definition. But what is important for me is that look at the three items: fabrication, falsification, plagiarism. It is clearly conceived, misconduct is conceived in epistemic terms. So it's either making up data, cooking up data, or faking authorship, right? So it is about falsehood. So let me start showing you some cases of what I take to be a completely different type of misconduct. That I call post-production misconduct or post-epistemic. So the evidence that I'm going to show are basically bits of text from retractions. So retractions are really the only evidence that we can get today about fraud. If you subscribe to Retraction Watch, which I hope you do, it's you get a bunch of emails every day, and you get these retraction notices. So you get after you read this stuff for a month, you kind of get the big picture of what's happening. The bad thing is that these retraction notices are not that informative. And they're not informative because the publishers don't want to admit what kind of mess they have on their hands. So the retraction notices are really semantically poor, okay? But that's what we have. So this is the case that started everything. Professor Moon is a great innovator. The short story here is that he's the guy who invented the fake peer reviews. So I sent a manuscript to Social Societies of Science, and Sergio Sismondo might say, you know, Mario, give me the names of 2 people who might be suitable reviewers, and I say, Jane Calvert, and I say, you know, jane.calvert@gmail.com, except that I have opened that account. So I get the manuscript to review, and I say, this is a manuscript that has great potential, it needs some improvement, and I list the improvement that I want to make, and most likely it gets published. The reason why he got caught is because he got super cocky, and he was turning in his reviews within minutes of receiving the request. Okay, but so it is funny, but also notice that that's information that only the publisher will be able to find. It's information that is completely beyond peer review, right? It's proprietary information that sits on the journal database. So Mr. Moon then spawned the Peter Chen case. The Peter Chen case is very similar. It involves fake peer reviews, but this is no longer one person doing it for himself. It looks like it's a little bit of a conspiracy between a bunch of people that they do these fake peer reviews, but they read each other's articles, and they cite each other a lot. Okay, so the aim of these things obviously is to get published, not just to get published, but to get published in a higher impact journal that the article would have otherwise been published. And you see the addition of citing each other to push up the citations. In some cases, these articles are also fraudulent or plagiarized, but in many cases they are not. So for the sake of the argument, I'm going to talk as if all of them are not fraudulent in content, right? And then we'll talk about the other ones, because my goal is to show you that there is a new kind of fraud that does not have to do with cooking up the content, but it has to do with, if you want, cooking up the publication, right, rather than. All right, and then this is the most recent case, 2015. What is important here, so it's the same story, fake peer reviews, but look at the distribution of the impact factors. So most out of 43 papers that were caught in this investigation, 28 were published in journals with impact factor between 1 and 2. So in science, that's low, okay? And it's only one of them was published in a journal with an impact factor over 3. So this gives you a sense that there are plenty of exceptions, that is, articles published through fake peer reviews in decent journals, but most of them, they tend to focus on the low end of the publishing business, okay? There is a quote there, this is an ISSTI article that you should read. So these STSers from Taipei, they went and interviewed some of the people who were caught, and one said, I'm curious about how it was accepted. And I'll show you how it was accepted in a moment. But that line also suggests that a lot of the people who engage in this, sometimes they do not want to publish. They are like, say, clinical people in a hospital. Suddenly, the hospital merges with the university wants the faculty to publish, and forces these people who did not publish before to publish, right? And, the game starts. Okay, editorial spoofing. This is a case of an editor who realized that 2 requests for peer review have gone out, but that he had not sent them. So somebody had got his credentials, his password and so on, logged into the journal system and sent out, most likely to themselves, a request to be peer reviewers, so that then they send out those peer reviews like, this is a promising journal, but how come this person, this is unconscionable, this person is not citing the seminal work of Mario Biagioli? And of course, the person puts in a footnote to Mario Biagioli so that he or she gets published, right? So this is, again, you hack the journal system to be put in a position of requesting citations to your work, okay? Just to give you a sense of, we're not talking huge numbers, but we're not talking trivial numbers. As of today, about 600 retractions have been issued for fake peer reviews. So if 600 have been issued, probably that's a tip of, many more are out there. So we're not talking 10,000, but we're not talking 2 either, okay? All right, so this is editorial spoofing 1. And this is editorial spoofing 2, that this is a case, Oransky, who is the director of Retraction Watch, looked at some of these cases of these reviewers, and he saw that there was somebody who kept asking for additional references to one person. And most likely, the person was the fake peer reviewer. Okay. This is plain, this is pretty straightforward, but I think it's fantastic. I mean, I think you have my same twisted sense of humor. Here somebody hacks into the database of a journal, finds the articles that have already accepted that are in press, and put his or her name on the byline. So talking, this is like a clean job, right? You just, and then Cope found evidence that, so going back to the Peter Chen case, just the straight fake peer reviews, that editorial services, the kind of services that most non-native English speakers have to rely on to get help with the editing of their submissions, for extra charges, they also supply the fake peer review. And this is from the Taiwanese case that I mentioned before. The cost of the package is indexed perfectly on the journal impact factor. So depending on what journal impact factor you want to publish, there is a sliding scale. And so this is the answer to the guy who said, I can't believe it got published. So this is the service that somebody on his team paid to get published. All right, quickly, what I'm interested in this series of examples I've given you is that there is a clear copycat pattern. You start the Peter Chen, the true innovator of the fake peer review case. That's the ground zero. And then you have people who move from one single lone wolf, so to speak, a fake peer reviewer to 2, and they add the co-citations, right? And then you go, then that model is picked up by the editorial systems. So you see that there is a pattern of additional features to these fraudulent schemes that to me reflect a copycat situation, okay? All right. This is, I'm going to skip it. I'll tell you something if you're interested in the Q&A. This is an additional example of, I've written about separately, people make up fake co-authors, which sounds like, from the economic point of view, sounds strange. Why do you want to give authorship credit to others? So the reason you do that is because you give them fabulous institutional affiliations. So there is a guy who has published a lot. He has made up a team at Caltech. Probably he has never been at Caltech. So there are several cases about you make up a co-author, so you forgo some authorship credit, but you gain the credit back by being able to publish in a higher impact factor journal, to be taken seriously enough by an editor to be, to have your piece sent out for review, and then you gain visibility, right? Because people notice, John Doe, Caltech, let's take a look at this journal, and that might lead to citations, Okay, so very quickly, a summary of what we have seen. So this kind of behavior falls outside of US definition of misconduct. In many of these articles, there is no data fabrication, there is no plagiarism, right? So not only this stuff is not, it does not fall under that umbrella, but also it points to a kind of manipulation that is not epistemic. It's really, it works at the margin, right? So it takes the article and, manipulates the acceptance of the articles, the publication of the article, and then the citation. I think that, clearly publish or perish still works, but now there is the addition of metrics. So it's not just publishing, but it's publishing and having impact. I also think that a lot of this stuff has to do with the deadlines. Again, these are kind of qualitative judgments based on reading a lot of these retraction notices. I think that people go for these modes of publication because maybe they're up for review and they need an article quickly, like in a month. I think the deadlines, metrics-related deadlines are part of. The other thing is that we obviously are talking about hacking as the main mode of agency here. So it's not making up data, massaging the statistics and so on. This is really hacking into the journal systems and do all sorts of creative things, which also shows, this is banal, but it's worth keeping in mind that in the old age of paper submissions, this would not have happened, right? So, this happens because now not only everything is handled digitally by the journals, but also sometimes you have one system that hosts a variety of journals, right? So this is not just digital publications, but it's enabled by digital publishing, by the fact that the industry has become digital. The evidence of this stuff, most of the time, is not public because it's all in the database of the journals. This is beyond peer review, right? Give you an example. This is a snippet about, I think this is the Peter Chan case. So a 14 months investigation with 20 people from Sage. Check the wording of reviews, the details of author-nominated reviewers, reference list, and the turnaround time for review. All this evidence, only the journal has it. Okay? So this is, the forensics have completely changed. In the past, we said, peer review is the best or the least bad forensic method we have. This is completely beyond peer review. Okay. The result, let me say it now because I'll skip it later. The result is that we have the emergence of sites like Papier. So we have like crowdsourcing modes of misconduct detection. Right? So there is too much work, as you saw here, 18 months, 20 people. So right now, the most effective misconduct detection node is Papier. People put, they flag a doubt that they may have about a figure or a footnote, whatever. People jump in, somebody will have those skills. The author can jump in and reply and provide additional evidence. If not, this thing just goes viral, and eventually somebody has to do something about it. And Didier and Gaspard have a piece on this based on the Voinet affair that ended last year in CNRS. So it's precisely a case where the scandal produced by Papier forced the institutions to act. So there is a complete different shift in forensics. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the next point quickly is that in the past, fraud typically was single-authored. you didn't, it would be kind of, the more people you involve, more, the likelihood of somebody who's going to squeal, go up. But right now, instead, this kind of fraud is often multi-authored, right? One example would be, and it's not just the scientists. So this is an example about, most likely, a journal planting a review article that gives a ton of citations to the journal, okay? This gets caught because when Elsevier, Thomson, now Clarivate Analytics, look at the citations. If there are citations within a journal, they just filter them out, or sometimes they take the journal out of the Web of Science for a few years. So the best way to do it is that two editors, get together and they say, I'm going to tell my authors to cite you, and you do the same thing. So the authors get those messages like that I think we all get. Well, we like your piece, but we would like you to bring it into conversation with some of the debates that have happened within our journal. They're asking for citations for their journal impact factor, right? So this can be organized differently to make sure that one journal gets a citation from the other and vice versa. So until recently, this kind of behavior, the co-citation, could not be spotted. So now they have an algorithm that detects peaks in citations. So if they see that there is citation action from one, a spike of citations, then they notice that. But until recently, this could not be done. This is a kind of a Google Translate letter from the dean of the School of Engineering at the University of Malaya. So look at the bold. So this is a memo sent out to the faculty of the School of Engineering telling them to cite 3 colleagues. Okay? So I went to check the University of Malaya. So the US and World News Report, they have horrible ranking. I mean, I don't believe in ranking, but the ones from the US World News Reports are particularly stupid. So the University of Malaya, as an overall university, is ranked 301 in the world. Okay, but then if you go to the subject rankings, which is based less on reputation and more on citation evidence, it shows up number 10, ahead of Stanford, number 13. And then I've included King Abdulaziz, which probably you guys don't know, but for me it's an item of pride, because my former chancellor, one of the things that took her down, among many other things, is that she had joined the board of the King Abdulaziz University, right? So, which is obviously the King Abdulaziz does the same thing that Malaya does, and in addition, they do a super heavy-handed version of the strategy that UK universities have been using for 15 years. That is, you hire or you give a 10% appointment to somebody right before the RA. So that's the system. University of Tehran also is doing pretty good, ahead of UCLA. On the left, I've just checked the numbers now. So University of Malaya is slipping. It went from 10 to 13, but it's still ahead of Stanford, right? Which is, and King Abdulaziz has jumped to 8. So, short story, I wanted to show that here, this gaming never stops, right? So you have individual scientists doing certain things, journals doing it, universities doing it. Okay, so that's the message that I want to send. Now, the notion of impact, born valuable. So I've talked about this in this article. There is a new journal. If you're interested in this stuff, let me know. I'll send you the PDF. So I think that the notion of the journal impact factor is The fact that the journal impact factor is becoming so important, despite what I take to be its logical, insanity, is an indicator of this problem. So the journal impact factor is that you count all the citations that a journal received over a 2-year period, and then you divide it for the citable items, right? So what I find fascinating is that in the olden days, evaluation is something that happens after the publication. Something gets published and then, it has impact. Instead now, effectively, a paper is born with impact, right? So it's born before it has impact. So there is a complete slippage between people say, oh, no, the journal impact factor, it evaluates the journal. But an article published in Nature with 43 it counts as the impact of the article. So what I'm saying is that the slippage between the ranking of the journal and the value of the article is immediate, right? So effectively you have, so you can use different metaphors, but this is a little like nobility. Depending on the family you are born in, you have value. So as opposed to waiting for that value to emerge during the life of the article. So technically, impact refers to an effect, but actually it's an effect that has already happened, that is assumed to have already happened. So I think that the reason why the journal impact factor is so important is because it's a pricing mechanism. It's a way to price future value and to make it transactable now, right? I mean it actually quite literally, in the sense that the people who seem to be less upset about the journal impact factor are young, very successful scholars, because the journal impact factor allows them to compress time. I may be a genius, I published 2 articles in Nature in the last 2 years, but if you want to count impact, I might get my endowed chair in 10 years. Instead, I go to my dean, I say, I have 2 articles in Nature. That's money in the bank. So it is a way to compress time and enable more transactions, right? So it's not just an instrument of evaluation, but it is a tool for transactions. By transactions, I mean you hire me because I have these articles with this impact factor, and you know that you can then get higher university ranking, which then allows you to charge more tuition, right? So I mean transactions in a pretty literal sense. And I'm particularly taken, and I'm curious to see what you think about the fact that, the compression of time is a key feature of the impact factor. Okay, now, so far I've discussed all these forms of manipulation that are non-epistemic, right? So they're all about working at the margins of the publication. Now I want to give you a quick sense of how good old fraud actually has developed new modes of operation based on metrics and other things. So this is probably poor Walter Benjamin. He would probably get upset about this, but I actually mean it. Okay, so take a look at these quotes. So according to the notice, so this is about image manipulation. Image manipulation is by far the most common type of misconduct you encounter today. The Office of Research Integrity in the US last year, about 80% of the cases they looked at, there were image manipulation. Mostly from biology, but any kind of photographic evidence. So blots, Western blots and non-Western blots, photographs, and anything. But it has to be photographic, okay? So what I want to point is the fact that it's not just the fact that people Photoshop images, but these authors use the same image in the 2 papers to represent different experimental conditions. So you understand, it's not just one making one beautifully photoshopped image, but it's reusing it, okay? And same thing, in one case, the researchers had duplicated a panel in a Western blot used to detect proteins. Okay, so it's not just that's the reference from Benjamin. It's not just the digital manipulation of images, but it's also the dissemination of copies. Okay, so fraud is no longer authentic. That's here you have. So this is a case of pastiche. In one paper, the authors claimed a figure taken from a public website represented human brain tissue, but it showed mouse brain tissue. In the other, the authors said a figure showed spinal cord compression. However, it was a picture of a disease caused by tapeworm. Right. So again, here, when they're not even trying to fake it, they just, they do a grab from a public website, they put it in the text, and they put a caption, right? So you see that we're not talking fancy stuff. We're just talking quick. This is an example. I'll let you take in the craft. So one additional feature of this type of fraud is that it's internal to the publication. So this is really a form of editing. So we're not talking about I make up fake data. So I make up something fake, and then I use that fake thing to represent it textually, in an argument. Here, the faking is within the physical article. Okay, so there is no reference. You just manipulate an image within the article. You don't manipulate something outside that you refer to through a fraudulent claim. Okay, so it's purely textual. That's what I'm trying to say. So this is. So I feel I'm getting nostalgic about the good old days. So what we're seeing here is a shift from artisanal fraud that is typically material. Think anything, Paul Kammerer, the painted mice, Piltdown Man, whatever. There is the physical production of material evidence, typically site-specific, okay? Instead, now we are completely away from that. You have a digital production and reproduction of virtual fraud. One thing that is a question mark, it's just an hypothesis. So what I also think is happening is that the claims that are attached to this new fraud are low level. If you think about, Piltdown Man was an attempt, probably was a hoax, but the goal was to show a missing link, right? The Kammerer thing was an issue of defending Lamarck against Darwin. The painted mice at Sloan Kettering were painted to make a case about immune response to cancer. So these were all big claims. Okay. Instead, now we just have a ton of crap. Really a ton, right? And that's why I'm fascinated by the fact that Photoshop is not just used to make a fine, beautiful fraud, like the fake Leonardo, like the last one that was bought up by some prince in Saudi Arabia, but just to produce a ton. Okay, so. how am I doing with time? Should I cut it out? Okay. So I will raise. So you see where I'm trying to go. That is, the new fraud tends to aim low, and I don't know. It's not clear why, but I think that all the evidence I've shown, the fact that a lot of the articles with fake peer reviews were low impact factor journals, a lot of the images that I mentioned also tends to go into low impact factor journals. The same pattern continues when you look at plagiarism. Most plagiarism is found in low impact factor journals because it's part of the logic. So, I plagiarize something that Robin has put in Social Studies of Science. I would be an idiot if I republished it in Science, Technology, and Human Values. I'm going to publish it in the lowest impact factor journal that my dean considers as peer-reviewed, so it checks the box on one peer-reviewed article, right? So I plagiarize and I republish, but in a way that it will hopefully not be read. So I republish to make it disappear. So you notice the right? Okay. Or I translate it in Italian, and I also go for a nice obscure journal in Italian. I get credit only from there, but it's safe. Okay, but you see the logic. I plagiarize, but if people read it, they're going to find it out. So I don't want anybody to read it. Right? So publication is a strange. So what does these here are more examples of all this stuff happening in very low impact journal. Or sometimes you pick up an obscure topic, and then which you plagiarize a paper about, and then published in a low impact. So that's like 2 layers of safety. And this is my good friend Putin, who did the same with his dissertation. You cannot read Putin's dissertation, except in this case, it's not just published. Is that if you are the librarian where the dissertation sits, you know that you'll be killed if you let somebody read it. But it's the same thing. You claim a dissertation to say PhD, to claim the title, but then you want to make sure that nobody reads it, because otherwise they would understand that it's all plagiarized. You see the trend, or at least that's the trend that I'm going to work on next year, that all these forms of plagiarism, many of them are metric specific, and also they're indexing a mode of publication that has enough impact to count for whatever dean you are interacting with, and with different kind of expectations, right? Because I also believe that clearly we're talking a lot about the global south here, in the sense that a lot of universities now, they want to go up in their global ranking, and they force their faculty to publish like crazy, because that's the only way that they're going to go up in the university ranking, right? And so they're not too picky about where they publish, because it's a certain kind of economy, right? And then on the other side, instead, we have the luxury economy. And I'm using the term luxury a little as a figure, but also somewhat literally, because if you look at the distribution of journal impact factor, it's quite extreme. So you have Nature that is typically low 40s, Science that is high 30s, and then a lot of very good journals are clustered on the 10, between 30 and 10. And then you have a huge tail of the, 2 or less, right? So you really have a luxury good economy and then a non-luxury good economy, and my guess is that it's global north and global south. And this is, by the way, of course, I'm not in any way, there is a lot of stupid kind of criticism of global south, oh, they copy this. I'm not in any way engaging in moral finger pointing here. I'm just saying that in the global south, I think that the scholars there are working under nastier metrics pressure than we are, because they have virtually zero resources. And now they have the administrators who want to go up in the global university ranking, and they're pushing for any kind of publication that just needs to be counted. Nobody needs to read it. So it's just something that can go on a CV, right? And then on the other side, instead, we have the luxury good. Now, the luxury good, there are problems with metrics too. If you read stuff about recent big time fraud, it comes out in Science and Nature as well. And some of the discussions of that have to do with the fact that if your impact factor is 41, there is no way in hell you can maintain that impact factor just by drawing attention from scientists. You need to publish stuff that is New York Times grade, right? So it gets picked up by the media, it makes a huge splash, and that splash is needed to attract enough attention to sustain the level of citation that a journal like Nature needs to sustain in order to stay in the low 40s impact factor, right? So the tendency to make much bigger claims than the ones supported by the evidence is obviously, in my view, connected to metrics. And the journals are in cahoots. The journals are okay with that because that's the way they're going to maintain. So I'm not trying to, so metrics is key at both levels, in both economies for very different reasons, but it's there in both economies. And that's it. Thank you very much.